What's shaking everybody? Climate change. Hey, it's something I didn't accept about 25 years ago because I did take the time to educate myself on what was really going on. But reality doesn't care about acceptance. Just like gravity, it's real whether you accept it or not. So today we're going to cut through the noise on climate change. We're going to talk about the physics, the real world impacts, the money behind denial, and what actually works. No sugarcoating. Joining me to talk about this is Tim Christophersen. He's a VP of Climate Action at Salesforce. He's also formerly with the UN Environment Program and author of the book Generation Restoration. Tim's focus is treating nature as critical infrastructure and showing how the private sector can scale solutions fast. But before we get started, if you're new here, hey, this is Zero Distortion. If you want straight talk without spin, hit subscribe and share this with one person who still isn't sure. Now let's get into it. Tim, thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Hi, Russ. It's a pleasure.
Well, I already gave a little bit of information about you, but can you share a little more with our audience who may not know you, a little about who you are and about your work?
I'm Vice President of Climate Action at a global technology leader called Salesforce, based in San Francisco. And I lead their investments in climate action. That means how to make the company more resilient against climate change that we're already facing, how to help mitigate climate change, make it less severe for the world at large. And before that, I was with the United Nations for 15 years. I just recently joined the private sector. Also a part-time farmer. I'm calling in from our farm and recently wrote a book called Generation Restoration about planetary scale ecosystem restoration, how to bring nature back and abundance for everybody at scale worldwide.
Very important topic. And yeah, your book, is it out now or is it coming out, Tim?
14th of October, so probably will be out by the time this
Yeah.
airs. So perfect timing. Thanks for having me on
Yeah.
the show.
No, good. I'm looking forward to it. And where can folks get that? They're going to be able to get it on like Amazon.
And on all the major platforms, published by Wiley, which is a big publishing company. And like most of my friends actually still prefer to go to a brick and mortar bookstore and order it there. So that's also possible. You can get it on all the channels where you can get books.
Fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to that. So let's get into this topic because there's a lot there, and it's been very divisive, maybe a little less divisive as time has gone on. But whenever I did the opening, I'm a guy who worked in fossil fuel power gen, and so if you asked me 25 years ago about climate change, I was like, it wasn't something that was really important to me. And that's really because I didn't take the time to educate myself on it. And now we have so much more information from even then. I think it's important for folks to really maybe do the research and listen to professionals and experts like you. So let's start with what's real. I mean, a basic question. How do we know that humans are warming the planet?
So for many of my friends and neighbors here in the countryside, it's a similar issue. They see climate change as this very science-heavy debate, and they find it difficult to enter. But everybody now knows here that the climate is changing because everybody can see it. So the basic science behind it is just that there are heat-trapping gases, mostly carbon dioxide, but methane is another powerful one, that trap the sun's heat in the Earth's atmosphere, just like a greenhouse. That's why it's called the greenhouse effect. And while that is no longer debated, really, what is debated is what are we going to do about it? Because there are several solutions that would cost something. There are several solutions that would have benefits for some people, but not for everybody. So I think the discussion has shifted to climate action. One thing that I focus a lot on is nature's role in all of this, because the more you move to the solution side, the less contentious the topic becomes. I've yet to meet somebody who hates trees and say, trees are really not something we should invest more in and spend more time in forests. So the more you focus on solutions to climate change, such as more resilient food supply chains or renewable energy in the grid, the less contentious it actually becomes, because then you can see the benefits for everybody of climate action.
If there was, because there are some skeptics, I would say I was a good faith skeptic, 20, 25 years ago, whatever. Someone who's open-minded, what is one or two pieces of evidence that you would point to say, here, look at this data, and this is proof that our climate is changing, areas are warming, we're seeing different things happening here on the planet.
So one is called the Keeling curve, that basically measures the CO2 levels in the atmosphere. And we just have a very clear upward trend that correlates very strongly with the rising costs for extreme weather events that we've seen, and with sea level rise, and with the other effects that we can measure of climate change. So there is no doubt that this is real. If you are not a physicist or have a degree in chemistry, I think looking at the costs of insurance is the one thing that everybody can agree on. And if you look at the 1980s, there were about $3 billion events, extreme weather events, with a payout of more than $1 billion in the US. And then in the 2020s, we had over 20 of those events. So you've gone from 3 billion to over 20 billion in costs of these extreme weather events, and they are strictly correlated to the rise in global temperature and to sea level rise to some degree.
Yeah, that's a pretty easy statistic to point to, right? I'm thinking of Florida. We just sold a condo in St. Petersburg, Florida, and insurance rates are going way up there. Some people aren't going to be able to be insured, for example. I just talked with a lady this morning who moved from Florida to Ohio, and she said, "Hey, I just couldn't take the hurricanes, the severe weather. It was happening more and more frequently," and she lived down there for a few decades. So yeah, I think that's a really good point.
I think the other point that confuses some people is when we talk about climate change, the temperature changes that are happening sound relatively small. There's a Paris Agreement on climate change, and that has a goal of limiting this to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So let me translate all of that in Fahrenheit, first of all, because, this is otherwise even more confusing for a US-based audience. So that's about 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit difference. However, what we should keep in mind is that planet Earth's body temperature, if you will, the temperature of the Earth as a whole, of the biosphere, is lower than the human bodies. It's about 14 degrees Celsius. So a 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit increase would be equivalent to a 20% increase in the human body if we went beyond the 1.5 degree to what is now the medium term scenario for this century's warming that scientists have settled on. And if you increase the human body's temperature by 10%, it would go from around 98 Fahrenheit to 105, severe fever, perhaps going to hospital. But the current trajectory we're on is a 20% increase of the globe's temperature. And you do that to the human body, it will go from 98 to 111 Fahrenheit. So if you have 111 Fahrenheit fever, it's game over, basically. So they might sound small, these differences, but they are massive in terms of what they mean for the biosphere as a whole, which is, after all, Earth is one living, functioning system where all the parts are connected with all the other parts.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that, and it's a subtle change, right? They talk about 2050 and having something done, in this century. And a lot of people can't seem to think that long term.
Oh, it's not that long term. We've just passed the 1.5 Celsius. We've actually overshot that this year. So this is happening now. It's not about 2050.
So we're over the 1.5 now, you're saying, Tim?
We have crossed that threshold now. There's still a difference between what the temperature increase is of the ocean and what it is on land. Land heats up faster than the sea. And the ocean has already absorbed about 90% of all the excess heat that we've put into the atmosphere. So the ocean is our best friend, actually. It's the largest buffer we have, but it's coming to the limits now of absorbing that extra heat from the atmosphere. So no, this is happening now. This is not a problem for the 2050s.
Yeah, that even more urgency needs to be placed on this. And
Yeah.
we're eh, I'm in the clean energy sector and power gen in general, and I don't know, folks just don't seem, especially here in the US right now, they don't seem to be paying attention as much. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of folks like you, myself, and a lot of climate activists that obviously are looking at this and saying, hey, this is a big, big deal. But do you have any idea or any thoughts on why this isn't being taken more seriously, given we have crossed that 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold?
I think we have to make it more relatable to what people talk about in the kitchen table conversations, which is often cost of living, job security, job satisfaction, education, health. And climate change impacts all of those. We just have to make it relatable to people and say, if you want to save on your insurance, or if you want to make sure that your home in the Florida coastal zone or in a wildfire risk area in California is even still insurable for your children, you have to do something about this now. Otherwise, you can't insure your home anymore. And once we hit that point in the real economy and in the financial economy where things are no longer insurable, that will have ripple effects for all jobs, for the entire economy. So we can't let it get to that point. But it's already happening in some areas. The states have to step in and provide last resort insurance, because no company can insure anymore and make a profit out of home insurance with premiums that would be way too high for people to pay. That's a direct impact of climate change.
Yeah, and relating it to the kitchen table conversations, I agree. I think that's a great way to put it. And a lot of times those conversations have to do with money, right? With cost of living, with just lifestyle in general. So a few ways that I know of is the grid, right? That's had impacts. People are running their air conditioners, for
Yeah.
example. They're running them more, and they're running them harder, right? You're running them longer because the season is a little bit longer, depending on where you live, and they're having to run longer times. We've hit the insurance piece of it. Crops, we're
Yeah.
hearing a lot about beef being a lot more expensive, and I did a little research. Tell me if this aligns with what you're hearing. The climate change with regards to what the cattle are able to actually be out in the fields, and the food that they've got to eat, that's being impacted. So the cattle aren't as plentiful. They're maybe not growing as well. I don't know, but I did hear that there was an impact with climate change and what cattle are kind of seeing right now. Is that one? Because beef prices are a big one in the news right now.
Yeah, that's definitely one where both what we call mega fires, these large landscape fires that are spiraling out of control. But we're also seeing this for other crops. I like chocolate, for example, and cocoa prices have gone up 4 times. If cocoa is now 4 times more expensive, it's gone to about $10,000 a ton last year. It's gone down a little bit now, but basically the raw material for chocolate is now 4 times more expensive than it was 5 years ago. And what that means, and you have to pay attention when you buy chocolate, not only does it sometimes get more expensive, but in cases where it doesn't, the producers need to reduce the amount of cocoa that is in the chocolate. Instead, they put more sugar or more other ingredients that are cheaper, or they make the portion sizes smaller and sell it for the same price. So they have to respond to that increase in raw material costs. Coffee is the same issue. There are many, many areas where coffee is now impacted. And in my book, I talk about what we could do about those areas for securing supply for large agri-food companies, but at the end of the day, for all of us, because, there's probably more people than me who like chocolate and coffee. And we want to make sure we have that in the future as well. So what can we do? How can we invest in securing those landscapes that produce coffee and cocoa and other commodities, and at the same time make them climate proof and resilient? So that's one of the areas where we are focusing our climate action. And that's what I've described in the book, how to ensure we restore huge areas back into productivity to have that resilience in our supply chains.
Well, whenever you said chocolate, that really got my attention. I'm a big fan. And coffee prices, tariffs are hitting, but I hadn't thought about that. They're being impacted just through nature and what's happening. So again, examples of where it's hitting our pocketbooks. Any others that really jump out as far as the average American or citizen anywhere in the world where they're seeing these kind of pocketbook issues that are related to the climate crisis?
Yeah, let's take the most basic of all human nutritional needs, water. Prices for drinking water are going up, and quality is going down in many parts of the world. And that also is linked to climate change, because a warmer climate, a warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture and more water. So often the soil becomes drier, groundwater is less replenished. And we urgently need to make sure that the Earth's skin cover, if you will, the vegetation that covers bare soil, is put back into place, so we reduce evaporation of fresh water, because otherwise many areas are going to run out of water. And again, this is why restoration of ecosystems at planetary scale is the topic I keep coming back to, because with that, we could solve so many of our issues at the same time, not just climate change, but food security, energy security. There's a lot of energy in biomass. And we could ensure that the wildlife that has been plummeting, we lost about 79% of all wildlife populations since the 1970s, that starts to bounce back. Yeah, it's mind-blowing. It's 4% of the weight of mammals in the world are wild animals. The rest are humans and livestock. So we basically live in what you could call it a 10% world. We've reduced that abundance to such a level that we're not even aware of it anymore. And we can get back to that in a generation. And that's the title of my book, is Generation Restoration.
So important. The other piece that we're looking at is, I'll call it the denial delay machine. So denial has involved, there's less just direct denial. There's still folks out there that say climate change, no, this is just natural, how the earth works. It heats up, it cools off, and this and that. But I'm hearing less of that. So it feels like it's evolved. There are fewer people saying it's not real, and more are saying this problem is too costly, or the solutions don't work, or whatever. They don't want to be controlled. They don't want to have to drive an EV, which, those are some of the things that folks point to. What's your take on how the denial has changed over the years, and what's your view of how things are today with the pushback on the climate crisis?
Yeah, you're correct. There's actually data that supports that a vast majority of people now recognize climate change, but the propaganda machine that is fueled by the vested interests that have something to lose from taking action has shifted from denialism straight to doomism. And they've hopped over this whole selection of climate action and solutions that we have. So what is interesting here is to follow the money. Who pays for these misinformation campaigns? And There are, of course, mostly winners from climate action, because if we had cleaner cities, greener cities, energy independence, green jobs, sustainability, renewable energy, decentralized energy, it would be better for all of us except some large multinational energy companies. And there's clear evidence that there are ad campaigns, misinformation campaigns that are funded by the fossil fuel industry. And that also explains why they jump straight from denialism, which they can no longer support because the science is now so overwhelming and the evidence is so overwhelming. I mean, if you live in California and you open your window one morning and the sky is orange in San Francisco because the world's on fire, it's really hard to say, well, this isn't happening. So
Yeah.
that makes then, the jump to, oh, but it's too late to do anything about it, or it costs too much. It explains that jump to pushing misinformation that way. So I think the best thing we can do is focus on what the solutions are and be very pragmatic about them, because they are good for people. They're good for the bottom line. They're good for energy independence. They're good for decentralizing energy supply. They are very good for nature, because nature-based solutions are about a third of all the solutions we need for climate action. And, I think we all want more nature back, more nature in our cities, more nature in public lands, more forests restored where they have burned. So I think we just have to focus more on what the solutions are and what action we can take, and sort of those two fringes of denialism and doomism. I think they will be self-defeating at some stage, because it is more, it's just more promising and encouraging and optimistic to focus on the solutions. And that, I think, is at the end the spirit, especially of in the US, but also in other parts of the world. We want to be optimistic and look forward and do something. And you cannot do that by saying, this isn't happening, or I can't do anything about it.
Yeah. And they have some, there's myths out there, right? There's some things that they pushed. Here's a few of them. I mean, renewables are unreliable. That's something that I hear. I constantly push back on that. They're like, oh, it doesn't work if the sun doesn't shine or if the wind doesn't blow for solar and wind. My pushback is, hey, if the sun's not shining, wow, we've got way bigger problems, right? That's going to be a big deal. So we're in a different story at that point. The battery storage has obviously come a long way to offset when the sun's not shining, when the wind's not blowing, and that technology continues to grow, and it becomes a lot more efficient and a lot more economical. It's already the most economical. So that's an easy pushback that I have for those types of things. But when you hear people say renewables, they just can't cut it, what's your thought?
I live in Denmark, where the sun does not shine all the time. It's not like Arizona or Texas. And I have solar panels on my roof. And there are days here when I have to pay the grid to take the energy off my hands, because there's so much energy and there's so much wind and solar energy in the grid that it can't be used. So I think if we had more storage solutions, and the prices for batteries are falling, the prices of power to X, for example, to store it in hydrogen, is falling. We just have to solve the storage problem. This country, and again, it's not a country where the sun always shines, produces surplus renewable energy now on a majority of the days of the year. We just have to find a way to store it better. And then it's as reliable as the sun has always been. It's been there for a couple of billion years, and
Yeah.
two and some billion more. So doesn't get much more reliable than that. Just have to find a way to solve the storage problem, and we're close to that.
Yeah, very close. I think this decade and going into the 2030s, the storage component, because the chemistries are advancing, so much more money is going into the research and development. It just gets better and better. So I'm with you. It's not perfect yet, but wow, they're making some steady improvements. Here's another one. CO2 is plant food. CO2 is not a bad thing. I hear people saying that. What do you think the plants are using? It's CO2. Okay, but I mean, it's like water is my pushback on that. I need water, but I don't want to drown in it because there's so much. But when someone
That's
says, "Hey,
exactly it. Yeah. That that's exactly it. It's partly true. CO2 is necessary for our bodies, also for plants. But excess CO2 disrupts ecosystem functioning. It turns it destabilizes plant health, and what is more important and a larger issue already, it acidifies the ocean. You basically turn the ocean into a huge reservoir of the acid that is dissolved in the water when the carbon dioxide is pulled into the water. So that acidification of the ocean means you have less animals that can build shells out of calcium. So you have huge disruptions of the ecosystems for everything that is shellfish, and that disrupts marine food supply of sort of food chains. So we already have a massive problem with the excess CO2 in the atmosphere that disrupts ecosystems. It is not true that it's just making plants grow better.
yeah, that's it's just not true." I mean, just look around. It's not making trees grow faster or plants in general.
The funny thing is actually it did for a little while, but then the effects of too much CO2 combined with increased temperatures, less water availability, they've destabilized forests on a massive scale. And you see now these large outbreaks of pests. You see mega fires and even the boreal forests where they used to be much smaller. And all of that is a combined effect of destabilized ecosystems.
Well, let's talk about nature a little bit. I think you kind of laid out the case that nature is very much a critical infrastructure. So, can you talk a little bit more about that? I think that'll tie into your book a little bit, but can you kind of make the case on why, whether it's Fortune 500 companies or governments or whatever, that they should treat nature more like infrastructure?
Yeah, certainly. Nature is indeed everybody's business because at the end of the day, we all depend on nature. Just think about what you had for breakfast, and that is all directly coming from nature and ecosystems. In this case, agricultural ecosystems mostly. But we are taking nature too much for granted. And if you think of nature as a form of capital, natural capital, we've basically overdrawn that bank account, and we have to reinvest in nature so that nature can provide all these ecosystem goods and services for companies. To give you one example, working for a technology company, data centers use water for cooling, and we have to make sure that that water is available not only for data centers but for other uses such as agriculture. And the water is replenished through watersheds, often large forest ecosystems. So we have to ensure that those ecosystems that replenish watersheds are treated like infrastructure. And we think about them like at an infrastructure level. Everybody understands that building a 4-lane highway costs millions of dollars per mile. But we have to start to think about nature in the same way, because there are critical services such as clean drinking water that are now at stake if we just keep taking nature for granted. I think we've come to the end of that road where that works. And more companies are seeing that on their balance sheets. Obviously, the companies that produce and sell our food first and foremost, but also other companies through the impacts that nature and disruptions and natural ecosystems has on their supply chains and their value chains.
It's going to end up showing up more and more on your grocery bill, for example, right? That's something that people are going to see, just to kind of tie it back to the pocketbook. But yeah, so important. I mean, is there something that, as we close this out, something that you would say that your message would be to maybe skeptics, maybe folks that have been on the fence about what's happening, or just those that, yeah, I see it's happening. What more can I do to help and do my part? Because everybody can do something, and all of that adds up, is the way I look at it. But What would be your advice to help in helping the planet to heal a little bit from what we've been putting it through?
Yeah, the answer might surprise you a bit, but maybe it's a positive surprise. I in my book, I end on a chapter where I also describe a personal journey of buying a farm and restoring it. Obviously, that's not for everybody, and it's actually a huge respect for farmers. It's very hard work. But
Yeah.
what I would advise everybody to do is just spend more time in nature, because with a new relationship with nature and understanding that humans are part of nature and all our cities, technologies, all our culture is part of nature and is not only linked to ecosystems and depends on ecosystems for water and food and many other services, but they are an integral part. Nature exists everywhere, even in cities, even in our own bodies. We're walking ecosystems ourselves. So
Yeah.
spending more time in nature and understanding that we are part of a biosphere, of a system that is under strain, will automatically lead people to see what they can do about it. Because there's many things we can do. We can change the way we eat. We can change the way we are politically active, or we join restoration initiatives near us. What I like about this topic of nature restoration is that it's such a hopeful, action-oriented, practical thing that everybody can do. You can go out and help restore a landscape near you, a city park, spend more time in nature. It'll be good for your blood pressure and your stress levels and your health and doctor bills, but also it will allow us to repair that relationship with nature that we have eroded. We're in a sort of suicidal war with nature at the moment, which we cannot win, because we're at war with humanity and with this experiment called human civilization. We need nature to function, and the first step towards that is basic ecological literacy, and we can learn that by spending more time in nature. So my ask to everybody is, go out and spend some time in nature, think about nature in a different way, and then of course read my book.
Yeah, I love that. That's an excellent suggestion. We're all connected, right? Nature is connected to us. We need each other. I mean, that may sound a little bit corny, but I mean, it's the truth. That's where it is. And kind of the bottom line is reality. It doesn't care how we vote. Physics is undefeated, right? We may not be able to stop that 1.5 degrees Celsius change entirely, but we can certainly curb further impacts. And it's not just about protecting our health and our security, but dollars are involved, and this future that we're going to hand off to that next generation. So I really appreciate it, Tim. Hey, before we wrap, where can people find you and follow your work, and again pick up your book, Generation Restoration?
You can follow me on LinkedIn and also on my website, timchristophersen.com, where there's also some more information about the book. And I'd love to also hear from people to share on social media what they do to rebuild that relationship with nature. So please go out there and spend more time in nature, then talk about it. This hashtag Generation Restoration is also the hashtag of a United Nations decade that we're in right now. It's called the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So there's a groundswell. If you just check on Instagram, there's about 140,000 posts with that hashtag. So just check out what young people are saying on this topic. It's very, very encouraging. It's fascinating, actually.
Hashtag Generation Restoration. Love it. Love it. And Tim, thanks so much for your time today and incredible insight. Really appreciate it. And to everyone listening, hey, this is Zero Distortion, where we cut through the noise so you can make better decisions. So subscribe, share this episode with at least one person who maybe is still on the fence about climate change. And we'll catch you next time.